Realm of the Mad God might be the hardest game I've ever played. No other game comes to mind that can send you so far back after a small mistake. And on top of this, for beginners, it can be super confusing to get started because of all of the features, items, areas, goals, and more. But I love Realm of the Mad God, and it's worth trying, which is why I'm here to make it easier, whether you're a brand new player, returning, or want to send this to a friend. This guide, and my YouTube channel and stream, will be perfect for your introduction into Realm. When you start on the standalone client for Realm, you are forced to play Wizard, but if you play through Steam, you can choose between 5 different classes. I wouldn't worry too much about classes that you're locked away from because they're really easy to unlock. All you need to do is play a few minutes on each to unlock them all. The requirements are always like get another class to a certain level, and as you'll find out soon, getting to level 20 is a breeze. I'll give you guys some tips soon to make it super easy. Keep in mind, the later classes that you unlock aren't exactly better. If you want to know what the best classes that you can choose from are, I made a separate new player class tier list video, but the too long didn't watch of that is, the best class by far in my opinion is Necromancer, followed by Paladin. If you really like the dagger classes, I recommend Rogue. If you like the katana classes, I would recommend Ninja. If you like the wand classes, choose Sorcerer, and if you like the bow classes, choose Bard. When you do choose the class to start on, it sends you to this tutorial. This is a super simple rundown of the basics of the game. It's a shame they don't go into too much detail about the most important parts of the game, like how pets work. But don't worry, I'm here to cover for them. Now when you get to Nexus for the first time, you might be super confused, as many brand new players are. True story, at least once every few months, I find a new player asking where to actually play the game, because it's way up this alley, off the screen, and that's where you can actually start the game and start progressing your account. Everywhere else in the Nexus doesn't really help you initially, but it's important that I go through it all, because there's many super beneficial features that will help you along the way. Firstly, even though the Nexus is massive, like when you go beyond the walls, there's a lot of trees and scenery and cool things to find, there's nothing actually anything useful there. Everything is in this box in the Nexus, other than the realm portals. On the outsides of this inner box, there's a lot of floating items. Don't worry about them, you don't need to buy anything in the game to progress. Almost everything that isn't cosmetic is obtainable in-game, and even some cosmetics. And sometimes the costs of some of these items are so ridiculous compared to the ease of acquiring them in the game. Like for example, the gear that you can buy. Now starting at the top left, we have our first ROTMG NPC we'll be talking about, Bill the Wizard. Now this guy has a lot of things that you can buy, so shield your wallets. But it can still be extremely helpful for free-to-play players as well. Like firstly, often the developers give out free packs which are found in one of these boxes, and they don't cost anything, but you do need to manually claim them. They often hold items that are extremely useful for your account, like vault expansions, backpack expansions, pet feed, and much more. There's also ones that you can purchase but with the free-to-play currency that you earn on death, called Dead Fame. Like for example, the ones that are only available for a limited time on new accounts. One of which is the one that gives you a vault expander, and the other one that allows you to get additional characters on your account at the same time. Since you only start with one character slot, this is a must, but so is the vault for how cheap it is, for its benefits. On the next tab, we have the skin tab, where you can buy different appearances for a set class, but only for real money. However, keep in mind there's many ways that you can get skins for free, like the free packs that I mentioned, or drops in the realm, or you can get them from the quests that I'll talk about soon. There's also the food tab for progressing your pet faster, which is also not needed, especially if you use my ultimate free divine pet guide. We'll talk about the pet system more in a moment. The next tab is the equipment tab, where you can buy gear for your character. Most of it is pay to win, but you can buy some spending the currency that you earn on death. However, I don't even think the costs of the free-to-play currency is worth for how easy they are to get in the game, except maybe the Paramount Hit Points ring. The utility tab only has things you can buy with real money that helps with your progression and convenience, a lot of which you can get for free as well. The forge tab involves items that expands the functions of the forge, which is a feature that we'll talk about soon. The keys tab is full of these items that you use that spawn a dungeon on top of you. You can only get them for gold, but keep in mind you can find all of these in the realm just by playing the game. And the vouchers tab is new as of the creation of this video. It's meant to be a system where Deca and its content creators like me can share codes where you can claim items and realm gold, so I guess join my Discord for updates on how I'll give those out when I get them. Well, that's enough of Bill. Let's move on to this guy, this spooky guy with a big axe. He allows you to enable the Crucible Mode. The Crucible Mode is an optional mode that you can toggle off and on at any time on a character to alter your stats, usually in a challenging way, and usually it's more interesting, but this season it reduces your speed by 5 and vitality by 3, but increases your defense by 5. Previously it's been really cool things like, for example, it would disable your pet and give you some stats. However, the benefit of these challenges is, it can vary, but for this one, you get a bit of Battle Pass XP, 5%, which allows you to progress in the Battle Pass faster. We'll talk about that more in a moment. There is also sometimes events that benefit Crucible Mode, where you get more drops against certain enemies, and you get more access to missions in the mission tree while playing Crucible. At the moment, they're not too amazing. This one's pretty good, but it's small and you can only do it once. For completing 5 Deadwater Docks, you get a reskin tier 13 weapon, which is near the best weapon that you can get. Now, the trick with Crucible Mode is you turn it on temporarily for when you need to do specific dungeons, and then you toggle it off for the rest of your character. Very silly feature in my opinion, but to go into more detail with the missions, do not ignore them, because they can give you a massive boost to your account. The amount of free stuff they offer is crazy. It ranges from top tier gear, to inventory and vault expanders, to potions that max all of your stats, and more. For example, the highlights of this mission tree is the repeating chest quests. Depending on your experience level, you can either do this one, where it requires 2 magic woods or 2 sprite worlds, 2 really easy dungeons for a standard quest chest daily, or this one where it requires 2 ice caves or 2 mountain temples for a mighty quest chest daily, or even this one for end game chests, you just need to do a Moonlight Village. It's a tough dungeon, but I should have a guide released for that dungeon by the time this video is uploaded, and it can be done by any character and any player, in my opinion, but it does require some tough dodging. By the way, if you are claiming the endgame chest, I do recommend claiming the Moonlight Village one. It's the best one in my experience of opening more than 3,000 chests, based on the feed power it provides, and I feel like it's really generous with gear as well. Other missions to look out for example, is like these ones that give you the gear for seasonal characters. I'll explain more of what seasonal characters are in a moment, but this one for completing 2 Cogbold Steamworks or 2 dungeons with the difficulty over 7, give you a near top set, and this one that requires you to max all of a character's stats will reward you with a consumable that will max all of the stats of another character, whenever you want. And it also gives you a inventory expansion, meaning 8 more slots. There's also this really easy mission that you can do daily, which gives you 5 potions of your choice, which you can either use to progress your character faster, or stack up as an emergency backup for when your character dies. Also, if you're a busy guy or girl, jokes there's no girls that play ROTMG, you can complete these repeatable BXB missions to progress through the Battle Pass faster. The one-time completion ones are usually more generous though. I can't talk about the Battle Pass this much and not show you what it is. From the Nexus, you can access the Battle Pass by clicking on this bar. The Battle Pass advances by killing enemies in the realm and completing the missions that I just showed. You can get a bunch of stuff for free, but much more if you're willing to pay. And to be honest, this is probably the most worthwhile gold purchase in the game if you do buy it repeatedly and actually complete the Battle Pass all the way through, because of all the items you get, and there's these 2 tokens that you can get that it discounts the future Battle Pass by 40%. Generally, if you do tougher enemies and dungeons, you get Battle Pass XP faster. Next to the Crucible guy, we have the guy that converts your characters from seasonal to non-seasonal. We'll talk about the benefits of this in a moment. Across the aisle we have the character changer, but he's kind of useless since you can do that at any time by clicking at the top left if you do have multiple characters. Now we move on to this portal that takes you into the daily quest room. In here, if you go to the end, there's 2 different NPCs. The one on the left has the daily calendar, where just by logging in you can claim free stuff, and the further you go, the better loot you can get. This offers a bit of everything, including coloured dyes for your character, pet feed, gear, skins, eggs, tokens towards vault expansions or character slots, and much more. Even if you're not actively playing, you can log in for a split second each day just to progress. Just make sure you claim it by the end of the month. Try claiming as often as you can so you don't forget and you don't miss out on a whole month like I have a couple of times. Sometimes support is nice enough to give you the items you missed out on if you just forgot to claim. You can easily contact them by typing in ROTMG Deca Games support in Google. The NPC on the right offers you temporary missions. The ones in the tab marked quests reset daily at a specific time, and they often involve you turning in marks which you gain from a specific boss in exchange for chests to open for even more loot. Most of these aren't worth doing, especially because the marks just clog up your vault, unless you were planning to farm that specific dungeon on the same day that you got the quest anyway, so that you can trade them all in on the same day so they don't stick around in your vault. But keep in mind there is a vault designed for marks and forge items in the top left of the vault as well. And also, there are some that are worth doing. The Cave of 1,000 Treasures quest is a must, because it only requires one mark and gives you a chest worth more than the difficulty of the dungeon by far. And it gives you a loot drop potion and a loot tier potion on top of all of that as well, which generally boosts the loot you can get and the chance that you get it. Also, storing exaltation marks is pretty worthwhile doing because the quests only require 3 of each. However, these are endgame dungeons, so maybe don't worry about that too soon. In the events tab, it mostly holds limited time quests that are more worthwhile doing, and usually involves you trading in a token that only exists with a temporary event, for gear or skins. When we go back to the Nexus, there's some more important things in the very middle, the least of which is this yellow guy that changes your name for $10, what a bargain. Then there's another portal for the pet yard, and man, pets in this game are crazy for a few different reasons. Reason number 1 is the power they can reach is insane, and I recommend against rushing it with real money, because not only is it a satisfying form of progression for your account, but also when you do have a strong pet, it can actually make the game a bit boring, depending on what you're doing, because of how strong they are. It's also insane because you can make a small mistake which can cost your account hundreds of hours and dollars if you spent money on your pet as well. I have a full video detailing on how to get a max strength pet for free, and it is a long video because of how detailed it is. It details every step from the very beginning to the end, but it is time stamped all the way through, so just go to the parts of the video that are relevant for you. But just to run you through the pet basics, you get pet eggs in a variety of ways, but mostly through enemies in the realm. Hatch them in here to get a pet. You want to aim for the abilities Heal and Magic Heal. Those are the strongest by far, and they should be the first 2 abilities that your pet has. You can use the currency you'd get on death to feed your pet, and then level up your pet yard so it allows your pet to advance even further, and then fuse them. Do not use gold for any of this, it's so not worth it because of the guide that I have. Make sure your pets are maxed before every fuse, because that's the mistake that you can make that can cost you the power of your pet. If you make a mistake with your pet, you can email support to undo it. Do not pull items out of your gift chest that are worth over 650 feed power until your pet is divine. Please trust me, because the fame costs for feeding your pet increase drastically. So if you feed your pet higher feed power items, you don't have to worry about feeding it as often. Watch my pet guide on the specific feed power recommendations for each rarity of pet. So like for example common, uncommon, rare. And also tips on how to get fame and feed power much faster. Moving on, we have guilds. You need to be in a guild to be able to enter here. And to be honest, it's not much more than just a private place for your guild mates, but I'll talk about this more in detail later when we do talk about how to find other people to play Realm with. Now for the vault, which is no doubt the portal you'll be entering in the most, maybe besides the realm. When getting in here, immediately there's your main storage to the left that you can drop all your items in. You can expand this by getting that new player vault in the shop for fame. You can also get tokens from your battle pass and calendars that can create these vault expanders. The mission tree sometimes has a mission that expands your seasonal vault, and when Deca screws up, which is surprisingly often, they offer compensation packs which often have these vault expanders in them. Keep in mind that when your characters are made, they are seasonal by default, and seasonal and non-seasonal characters have different storages, which is great because that essentially means double the storage room. When you want to move your items from your seasonal storage to your main storage because it could be overflowing, you can go to that grey guy in the Nexus with a seasonal character, with your inventory of goods that you pulled from your seasonal vault, maybe even equip some to bring even more. Talk to this guy to convert your seasonal to a non-seasonal, then stash it in your main storage. Keep in mind, the items to expand your seasonal and non-seasonal vaults are different. Do not claim your seasonal vault expanders on non-seasonal characters because they will be wasted, even if you pay real money, but I'm sure support would undo it if you asked. Then to the right of the Nexus portal, we have the potion storage, where you can store, now you won't believe this, but it's potions. This is best to store mana and life potions in my opinion, because they're generally the most rare, especially for beginners. Also, don't underestimate the feed power of potions for early pets. And just like regular storage, there is a separate one for seasonal and non-seasonal characters. Then, just north of the Nexus portal, for most people there actually won't be anything, but if you've played through an entire season, and you go on a non-seasonal character, there's a purple vault that appears. This is where all of your seasonal storage and potion storage goes to at the end of a season, as the new season begins and your seasonal storage gets emptied. This can actually work as infinite storage, where you can take items out whenever you want, but it can be risky because I have heard items disappear from them, mainly when you take long breaks. I think it specifically happens when you don't play for a full season, so I would try to take out the items as often as possible, or just make sure that you record them in case something goes wrong, and then message support. South of the Nexus portal, we have the gift chest. This is where all claimed items go. This includes items bought from the store, or claimed through the quests, or the calendar, or the battle pass, or missions. And yes, there is a different one for seasonal and non-seasonal, though the seasonal one does go to non-seasonal at the end of every season. This one also works as infinite storage and is not risky, so abuse it as much as you can. Don't take items out of there for no reason just to store them in your main vault. And again, save high feed power items for when your pet is divine. To the top right of the Nexus portal, we have the wardrobe. This is purely cosmetic and allows you to change skins, titles, gravestones, emotes, and entrance animations. At the very top left of the grave floor area, we have the forge. Now first of all, there's that chest I was talking about, where you can hold forge materials and marks. Yes, there is a separate one for non-seasonal and seasonal, so you can store up to 32 marks for free in these. But then just north of that, you can see the blacksmith NPC. The forge is an extremely busted feature, which is supposed to work like a pity system, and it allows you to create items from other items. Basically, you can create UT items, which stand for untiered items, from other untiered items and forge materials. They often require the silver material, the gold material, and sometimes the legendary material for the rarest items. Now you start with a few of these item recipes already, but you can unlock more by finding blueprints from bosses, or getting them from the forge section of the shop. Now I don't recommend spending real money here, and for the rarest blueprints, on top of getting them from the relevant bosses, you can also get them from the Tinkerer by trading in schematics that you get from the same bosses. So it's basically like a pity system for a pity system. You also need forge fire to craft items, which is a resource you gain 300 per day of, just by logging in. So it's another good reason to log in every day on top of the calendar, but you can only have 1600 forge fire at a time, so it's best always to be below 1300 at the most, to take full advantage of the system. I almost always just make an Oreo every 5 days, but my recommendation for you is to buy the blueprint of the Planewalker from the Forge for Dead Fame, or you can also find it in-game at a rare chance from Oryx 1, and by doing that you have an extremely efficient method of making feed power, which is making the Planewalkers. There's also a section for STs, which stands for set items. Similar to UTs, you can craft STs from other STs, and set items were designed to be used with each other to make them even stronger through bonuses, and that is how they work, but the most overpowered ST items are even really strong on their own, and usually they're extremely accessible. Now who the hell knows what the miscellaneous tab in the Forge is? Jokes, it's pretty useless, just skip that one. And there's also an option to dismantle items. This can help you greatly if you're struggling with space, like if you're feeling constrained by UT or ST items in your vault. If you feel like you have too many, you can just dismantle them, or you can just feed them to your pet. Now to the right of the Forge, we have the Enchanter, to either add, change, or upgrade the enchantments on your gear. Green dust you can get from all dungeons, red dust you get from harder dungeons, and purple dust you get from the hardest dungeons. Tiered items, which are overwhelmingly the majority of items, can spawn with enchantments that you can change for green dust. The cost depends on the tier, and sometimes the enchantments can also be upgraded with red dust. Generally, the best tiered enchantments are for weapons damage percent, for abilities mana cost reduction, and relative HP for armors and rings. UTs can also get their own enchantments called engravings, but don't worry about that because that is end game. Since we just talked about seasonal mode, let me just quickly get this out of the way. So why would you play the seasonal mode? Well, firstly, you have a slight chance to get shiny variants of UTs, which is a super rare special version, but purely cosmetic. This also means that you have a slight chance to get more white bags, because it's a separate chance to regular UTs. You also have more access to missions, as I showed you before, more access to space, and 10% faster Battle Pass XP rate. You also start fresh every season, which depending on who you are might be a good or a bad thing. Also, starting with a small vault every season is kind of annoying, but as a brand new player it won't make a difference for you. When going back into the Nexus, go to either side and there will be a bazaar. This is basically designed for private groups to gatekeep because the key poppers of these dungeons can kick other players. Going back to the Nexus again, there's two more buttons that we need to go over. There's an event calendar button that shows you the current and future events of the month. They're always for specific dungeons, so look out for these whenever you're playing in the realm. Also, there's this button to give your characters different colours via dyes if you like. Now that we're done going through the Nexus, let me give you a bit of a pay to win guide. The most gold efficient thing is the Battle Pass, if you complete it every month because of the 40% discount you get. Permanent account purchases are okay, like vaults or character slots, even though you can get them for free over time, though this does not include upgrading your pet. Since it's so easy, just use my guide video on that, man. Also, backpacks aren't the worst thing to buy in the world, and if you're into cosmetics then whatever, man. That's also not too bad. I mean, they can get wildly expensive. There wasn't a $100 skin before. But also remember, you can get cosmetics for free in the game often, through just finding them in the realm, daily quests, missions, and the calendar. But yeah, other than that, please don't buy anything else. It's not worth it, especially the gear, and buying Battle Pass tiers. Do not do it. Now, one of the many ways that ROTMG screws new players is that the game gives you some garbage settings right off the bat. For example, you're going to have a tough time seeing bullets, as they can be covered by friendly players and their own bullets, when you can actually hide both of these. I have a full video on the ideal settings, so feel free to check that out later, but I will go through the most important settings to change right off the bat for a beginner. Firstly, there's a camera rotate function in the game that can help you keep you safe because you can have your camera off center, giving you more vision ahead of you. Then you can position your camera towards the enemy so you can see it at a further distance, allowing you to react to shots earlier. The downside of that is you can't see as well behind you, so if someone pulls an enemy towards you, you'll probably react to it slower. You can use the off-center key to counter this, where dangers are all around you instead of just in front. It's also worth choosing the zoom level that works best for you, but also knowing the hotkeys to zoom in and out of your screen in case you need to micro dodge and zoom in more. I have my zoom in and out at O and P respectively. Quickly, I also gonna mention in relation to zooming, jump into your video tab where you can change your resolution, because unless you're playing on 1080p or 600p, your zoom options are super scuffed. Like for example, even though I got a 1440p screen, I intentionally play at 1080p because the 1440p option puts your character way too far back on your screen, as you can see, and it makes it super unsafe. Back to controls, some other things you might want to do is set your auto fire to your regular shooting key. There's almost never a bad moment to be shooting, so it just makes things more chill for you and reduces the chance of you getting arthritis from spamming too much. You also want to change your health pot and Nexus keys to buttons that you're super confident with. Like for example, Nexus is R by default, but since your pinky finger does almost nothing while playing, I like to give it full Nexus duty by putting my Nexus on shift. And I have health pot on R since it's like the second easiest key to press. Now we'll move on to gameplay, where we'll make your game way nicer to look at. Firstly, there's this opacity slider where you can choose how much you hide other players. If you slide it all the way to the left, it makes players almost invisible. You want to turn all of these options off. The ones you have that are on are unaffected by the opacity slider. So something you might want to do is that you have locked players still on, because this makes it that only the players that you select to be locked you'll be able to see clearly. Then you can lock players by typing /lock, then space, then their name. You do have to be near them and the message has to be case sensitive. Alternatively, in the bottom right when you're nearby them, left click their name and then the option appears. Lastly, go into the video tab and you really want to fix your particle settings, because depending on how you have it set, there might just be a spam of useless pixels, shots, and numbers on the screen. You do still want some pixels though, because they can help you a lot, so turning off all particles is a bad move in my opinion. For example, particles can sometimes show you the proper radius of your abilities. First, let's make it that we get rid of all of the useless particles that teammates and enemies might clutter up your screen with. Turn enemy and player hit particles and enemy particles off to get rid of heaps of useless pixels that would normally show on the screen for some reason. Next, turn enemy and ally damage text off, also ally notifications off. This will get rid of all of the useless numbers of others taking damage and instead only show yours. Then on ally shoot, turn it on hide all, and on ally summons, turn it off. This will make it that you can only see shots that you need to, say your own shots and enemy shot. Lastly, make sure Particle Master is on and Particle Effect is on high, so you can see all of your own particles. The reason why this is important is so you can properly see how your abilities behave. Like for example, for Sorcerer, this shows if your ability is actually connecting with the enemy, and it shows the radius of your abilities on classes such as Necromancer, Assassin, Mystic, and more. Look at how much difference it makes. After this, in the video tab and down in the interface section, toggle on show fame gain and toggle pots to map. This will be important for later, trust me. Let's talk a bit about combat, because that's basically the whole game, right? So you have 8 different stats in this game that is gained innately from your character starting at level 1 and through leveling. You also get them from your equipped gear and from stat potions that you drink, which you generally find commonly around the realm. You just need a lot. And since you followed my advice before in the settings section, you will now see how many pots you need to max when you hit level 20. The stats are attack, defense, speed, dexterity, vitality, wisdom, life, and mana. Dexterity and attack both increase your damage. Speed increases your, you guessed it, movement speed. Life increases your maximum hit points, while mana increases your maximum mana points. Vitality increases your HP regen, while Wisdom increases your mana regen. Wisdom also often scales with abilities depending on the class, like for example with Necromancer, Sorcerer, and Priest. And Defense reduces all enemy non-armor piercing shots by 1 each. Vitality, Wisdom, and Defense also affects an important mechanic in the game, called the Vital Combat. What Vital Combat or In Combat is, it's where taking a certain amount of damage, which is called the combat trigger, which is also shown when hovering this icon. When you take that much damage, you'll be put in an in-combat state. You can see the visual indicator of this when you have a yellow border around your HP bar, and the sword icon above the HP and MP bars in the UI lighting up. When you do get into in-combat, Wisdom and Vitality regen is reduced by 50%, and also all HP and MP recovery from pets will take 2 more seconds to trigger. If you avoid the amount of damage of the combat trigger for some time, you get out of combat where these penalties stop applying. The combat trigger is higher with each point of defense, with diminishing marginal returns. Initially, each defense adds 1 damage needed to the combat trigger, but after 16 defense it adds only 0.75, after 31 defense it adds 0.5, and after 46 defense it adds 0.25 per defense. Vitality also interacts with the in-combat system. The higher your vitality, the quicker you'll be able to get out of combat and lose its negative effects. Now let me give you some quick tips on combat. I'll make a proper video about this in the future, so subscribe for those. But here's the most important points. Number 1, avoid standing on enemies at all costs. There's no game that's more punishing for this because there's no invulnerability frames when taking damage, like some other games might have, like Binding of Isaac. So don't underestimate small enemies, and watch out for any shot emitters that might spawn, like portals. 2, remember that dying in this game will always happen, and they're a great learning opportunity. I've only gotten as far as I have because I'm in the top 10 players for the most 8/8 deaths in the game. As long as you learn from deaths and aim to not repeat them, every death will only make you stronger. 3, always assume that every character will die, and you will have a backup plan like another character or another set waiting for you in the vault for the next one that you make. I recommend when you have purchased the character slot for fame in the shop that I showed you before, have one main character set where you do things you're only comfortable with, and that character feeds your second character that you'll use for limit testing and trying new things so you can learn more. Or if you want the most prolonged enjoyment in this game, trust me, play each character at a time. Like a roguelike game, start fresh without taking anything from your vault. This will help you avoid extremely painful deaths of you stacking up your character in the vault and then dying in a couple of minutes, and just makes the journey of each character more satisfying. It also allows you to compare each run that you have, so you can try to break your records. Just want to give a quick shout out to those who support me making videos for this game. I'm basically the last person to consistently make videos for Realm of the Mad God, and there's a good reason for it because it's really tough. So I appreciate your help for keeping me from perishing. Consider becoming a patron, a YouTube member, or subscribing on Twitch. Even a like on the video and a comment helps a ton. Now let's finally talk about this portal, where all the combat goes down, the Realm. As of the creation of this video, there are old realms and beta realms. The beta realms are basically better in every single way, and the others will probably not exist soon, so there's no reason to worry about them. This is where you'll be spending a majority of your time, and at the moment there is a singular map, but they do plan to add more. The map is full of many different rookie, adept, and veteran biomes that hold a different theme and enemies. When you load into the realm, you spawn at the bottom left in the beach biome, and the further you go up generally, the more difficult the enemies and the dungeons they drop become, but the more rewarding the loot is to match. The land is littered with smaller monsters, but as you walk around you'll come across these enemies called Heroes of Oryx that spawn in predetermined locations, usually with different looking grounds, and the set pieces can also contain hazards like lava. They generally have higher loot and dungeon drop rates. Some respawn after a few minutes, and some only spawn with the creation of the realm. When you kill a Hero of Oryx, there's a 25% chance you spawn an event boss in any biome. These are basically the strongest enemies in the realm, and might require more people to defeat because of their damage and health pools, but you can expect the best drops from these. There's many different biomes with many different enemies and many different items and dungeons that drop from each. I strongly recommend using GHZD's Bestiary infographic for learning what biomes have which enemies and their drops. You should use it as a guide of where you want to farm. Big shout out to GHZD for the graphic and his awesome videos. You may have noticed the map is extremely big, but you don't have to worry about walking from the beach to wherever you want to go every time. This is because Deca added beacons. These are the triangles on the minimap that you can teleport to at any time by clicking on them on the minimap and then pressing teleport, same as teleporting to other players. There are some that are already unlocked when a new realm is created, and you can unlock even more by finding them along the roads. To unlock them, you have to defeat the beacon guardian that is on the same platform as the beacons. These are much easier than the event bosses, but are similarly generous in drops. Since these only spawn when a realm is created, it's a decent strategy to follow these roads and just to clear these bosses that protect the beacons. To get a new realm to spawn, you have to first close an existing one, and to do this you have to pay attention to the realm score in the top left. This percentage increases as you defeat enemies. Depending on the strength of the enemies you put to sleep permanently, the more this bar will be affected. In general, enemies that you find deeper in the realm contribute more to filling this bar, and Heroes of Oryx are better for this more than regular monsters, and event gods are the best. Therefore, events in the deepest realms will close the realms the fastest. When the realm score does hit 100%, the realm will close, meaning that no one will be able to enter it again. Then after 2 minutes the realm will shake and all players still within it will end up in Oryx's castle. Note that this does not include players that are in the dungeons in the realm. After this, the realm will respawn in the Nexus as a fresh one. The Oryx's castle is its own separate dungeon that is worthwhile doing for almost everyone, especially beginners, depending on how many people are with you. If you just started the game and you end up there alone, but you choose to stay, you might be asking to die. You can potentially do a chain of 4 dungeons here, with a total of 7 bosses with a wide range of difficulty, but also value in the loot they drop. Even the earlier bosses are great for beginners, but the bosses past the Oryx lair might be a bit too tough if you recently started, especially because the Wine Cellar and the Oryx Sanctuary require items called the Wine Cellar Incantation and runes respectively, which are found all throughout your time playing the game, though other people can open it, so just be careful. Also, to access this boss, Janus, you need to destroy all of the inanimate statues through the arms of the dungeon. Just make sure not to hug the breakable walls as you clear the way, because minions can stack up and instantly kill you. Also, watch out for the swords and portals that are thrown by the Stone Guardians and Janus, or you might get bonked instantly. So how do you know which items are worth hunting for? In general, when starting out, you want to advance the tier of your gear. You can do this instantly on a new character when you get to the beach, but you need to go deeper into the realm to keep advancing your tier. You can refer to GHZD's Bestiary to see which tiers drop from which biomes. But don't skip too far ahead too early, like don't teleport to a much later biome on a brand new character, because you're asking to die again. Even if you're a dodging god, the enemies will be way too tanky for the gear that you have. You can also get better items by entering dungeons you might come across on the way. You can refer to this other video I made, which is a dungeon tier list, to see which dungeons are the most worthwhile doing and why. While you are advancing the tiers of your gear, you want to look out for potions to increase the stats of your character. As you level up your character, you gain stats quickly, but when you hit level 20, You'll still need around 10 to 20 of each stat. To max these out, you need to drink stat potions which can be found all throughout the realm, from enemies and dungeons, but drop most generously from boss type enemies, like the heroes of Oryx, the event gods, the beacon guardians, and the dungeon bosses, but also from regular monsters deeper into the realm. You can find which potions drop from which enemies of each biome in the bestiary infographic. Mana and life can only be dropped from event gods, beacon guardians, and some dungeons in the adept biomes, but more regularly from everything including monsters in the veteran biomes. At the moment, realms are way more generous for dropping potions than dungeons, but something dungeons are generally better for is finding special gear. This includes the only way to get tier 13 and tier 14 weapons, and tier 14 and tier 15 armors, but more importantly, especially for new players, is the UTs and the STs that I was talking about before when explaining the Forge. Each dungeon has at least one UT and sometimes STs. There might be hundreds of these special items in the game at this point. The UTs drop in these beautiful pointy white bags, while the STs drop in these voluptuous orange bags. There's no way to know which dungeon drops which unique items, unfortunately, unless you look at outside sources like the Realmi wiki and my YouTube videos. I've made item tier list videos and plan to make much more. In the meantime, you can research items on realmi.com wiki. Here you can look up your class, then look up the different item types that your class uses, then look at the specific items of that type and see what's available and what you like. Unfortunately again, from here it's hard to tell what's actually worth your time hunting, apart from looking at the stats, which is why my tier lists and class guides on my channel will be a blessing for you, but you can also use this DPS calculator. Link will be in the description. Use this to compare an item's damage against others. Just keep in mind there's other factors that might make an item better or worse, like the range or the shot patterns. If you get a unique item that you don't like, you can always dismantle it in the forge for future crafting, or feed it to your pet. Just make sure to follow the rules in my pet video to avoid feed power waste. Another thing I'll touch on is exaltations. This is what this tab in the UI is all about, and is meant for endgame players. Basically, when you achieve 8-8 on a class and you defeat one of these endgame dungeons, you progress towards your exaltations, which eventually gives you things such as 5 more stats on top of what's normally possible with potions and gear, higher XP rates, higher damage, higher drop rates, special skins, and more. I'll have a separate video going into more detail into exalts, since it's not too relevant for beginners. I just didn't want you to worry about this scary part of your UI. Since this is an MMO, you're probably newer at the game, and it's important that you're not a loner. Not only so you have others to learn from, but generally playing with others will lead to more loot and fun times. Only when you have an extreme amount of experience and gear can playing solo or in tiny groups be better off than with more people, which is why it's important that you know about active servers, parties, guilds, and discords. First of all, unfortunately, most servers in the game are quite barren. The game isn't dead by any means, but this is because a large majority of players are cramming like sardines into a single realm or two. This is because most people understand that you want to play the game with as many other people as possible, and also because there are server queues. Sometimes servers have queues of over 100 players, waiting several minutes to play the game, when the same people could instantly leave the queues and join other servers and populate like another 3 servers and play right away. This game would be so much better if they removed server queues to force the spread of players, but that's a rant for another video. The servers that you want to play on if you're from the US are, at the creation of this video, US East, that's the main one that gets crazy busy and has the queues. Then there's US East 2, US West 4, US West, and US South. They can all have players depending on the times of day. For EU players, EU West is the most popular, but if you're an EU degenerate playing at weird times, you might need to play in the US servers I mentioned. Also, same goes with Australians with the Australian server. Servers on the server list can say online crowded or full, but these are really dumb because the server has to be insanely overflowing for it to even say crowded instead of online. US East often says it because there's like 100 people trading and doing keep ops in the Nexus, not even including the overflowing realms that also have their own queues. So a server could have 2 full realms and show up as still online instead of crowded, just like a completely empty realm. So unfortunately at the moment, there's no way to tell which server's good to play on just from the server list. The server statuses do really suck, and they need to drop the player requirements to show crowded, or add something in between online and crowded, like active or something. I don't know, man. Now this game is playable with tiny groups and solo, but it's just slower and more harder, but there's ways to directly meet other players. Like for example, there's a new party system one that has its own full tab in the bottom left of your UI. You can join parties to meet and play alongside other players. Something that can be way better than this are guilds. Guilds can make playing Realm of the Mad Gods so much more amazing if you find the right one. They definitely made it that way for me. They can be toxic and or inactive, so you want to avoid randomly joining from random guild invites in the game. The best way to find guilds are through your friends you've already met, or in my Discord. I have a looking for group channel where people often advertise their guilds. That's in discord.gg/sebchoof, link in the description. And then in the main ROTMG server and Realmi forums, they have their own guild recruitment sections. Also, last and very least is Discords. Actually, community Discords can be cool. There's people often playing and voice chatting in my Discords, for example, and the main Realm Discord, but I need to let you know about raiding Discords. If you want to make this game the most efficient possible, raiding Discords is the best way to do it. This is because people chain key pops in highly efficient groups, often with everyone in the same voice chat with a single guy telling everyone what to do. This was actually pretty necessary before the Realm rework, because some dungeons were extremely hard to come by, just by playing in the Realm. But thankfully it's not as needed anymore because of how often Exaltation dungeons drop in the new realms. I strongly recommend against joining raiding Discords because they often host toxic communities. All of the active ones right now at least have a history of staff that uses cheats and exploits, and that's the best case scenario. Many still rely on them to cope for their lack of skill. Discords can also trivialize the game big time, because people are essentially playing the game for you, and they get you to basically complete the game way too quickly, leading to the game becoming stale. There is definitely some people that still enjoy Discords, and you might like it too, but the chance is low, and I strongly recommend against joining them if you want a more enjoyable and durable experience. Other tips for having the best Realm experience: make sure to treat deaths as high scores like in classic arcade games that you strive to beat, instead of getting too tilted from every death. Also, playing the game in a roguelike fashion will make the game feel more fresh for longer. What I mean by this is, by not taking any items from your vault and no handouts, it makes every character feel fresh. This makes it easier to compare how far your characters go and make you really feel the journey of a character. Nothing feels worse than stacking up a character with your best gear and having it die within a couple of minutes. Been there, done that. Also, make sure to not take the game too seriously and avoid others that do play in that way. Like, for example, the raiding Discords, they're way too tryhard. It also doesn't take too long to find the game repetitive if you do try really hard. That's why. Playing this game casually has made this game infinitely more fun for me, because it helps you not get tilted over your deaths and the issues that the game might have. And also, if you're always stacking up your characters and going into endgame dungeons, you're doing like 5 dungeons over and over, which, as you can imagine, can get pretty boring. But I guess that's an endgame thing, so you don't have to worry about that yet. Anyways, make sure to check out the other guides on screen, like my pet guides and my dungeon tier lists. Like, subscribe, peace.